With Apocalypse having returned with the sole intention of unleashing Storm's magic potential, is Genesis ready for the Horsemen of the Revelation? What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, in today's video, we're going to be talking about X-Men Red number 17, written by Al Ewing, with art by Yildiray Chinar and color by Federico Blee. This issue, we see the return of the big bad booty daddy himself, the artist formerly known as Apocalypse, now going by the name Revelation, despite the fact that he's actually referred to as Apocalypse quite often during this issue, but I think that just largely has to do with the fact that no one knows about the name change, so I'm not really going to be as diligent as I have been in previous videos where I try to refer to him more by Revelation, though you will probably hear me say the name quite a bit. So why is Apocalypse back? If you have not been keeping up, you can check out my video up here to get a primer on why Apocalypse, now known as Revelation, is on the outs with his ex-wife, Genesis. This goes back to X-Men Before the Fall, Heralds of Apocalypse number 1. In this particular issue, we kind of already know all this information. We know that Apocalypse does not stand with what Genesis is doing. He also doesn't stand against what Genesis is doing. However, he's not just going to sit on the sidelines. We know that he has been slowly building up a new Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, or rather, Four Horsemen of the Revelation. We saw in the previous issue of X-Men number 28 that the character Sunfire had been found by Apocalypse, and while technically it seemed like he was grooming Sunfire to become his new war, which, to be fair, as we talked about in that previous issue, Sunfire had been a horseman of the Apocalypse in the past, that time operating as Famine. It's not really the case this time. He's not going to be Apocalypse's war. It's going to be something else instead. You see, he's not trying to create a Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, he's trying to create a Four Horsemen of the Revelation. And while in the past he notes that he used to take different characters and try to rename them and reshape them and remodel them in the image of his children who he had lost and have now, since Ten of Swords, been reunited with, now he wants something different. We see in this issue that Sunfire has returned, now fully merged with the character Redroot, which kind of gives you the impression, which is never actually said directly out loud, but just based on the fact that there's no other elements left once all the others are explained, it is pretty safe to say Sunfire is now operating as Apocalypse's Earth element. None of them are taking on aspects of the Apocalypse. They're taking on elemental aspects, some of which are in lockstep with things you might already know about them. The character Sunfire being able to control fire seems like Earth really wouldn't be his thing, but considering his connection to Redroot now, how merged they are in Redroot's ability to communicate with and even in a way control and shape plant life, it makes sense that he would now be considered Earth. Whereas the other character who controls fire and all this, the character Vulcan, the brother of Cyclops and Havoc, we see that Vulcan has been returned. He is unleashed. This is something we saw in Solicit, so I won't spend much time talking about it, but some of you may remember that not too terribly long ago, Storm had locked away Vulcan inside of a Mysterium-laden tomb. And it made it impossible, virtually, for Vulcan to get out. But Apocalypse, because of the nature of how he's able to reshape and mold not just his own atoms, but other matter as well, he was able to simply just open the Mysterium tomb and just let Vulcan out. However, he's not letting Vulcan off the leash. Vulcan is under Apocalypse's control. While he's not 100% being mind controlled by Apocalypse, Vulcan's not able to do anything that Apocalypse doesn't want him to do, and he wants Vulcan to be his fire. Initially, Vulcan thinks Apocalypse wants him to be death, but once again, he's not going that route this time. He wants fire to be fire this time around. We know the character Orc, who we were introduced to in X-Men Before the Fall, Heralds of Apocalypse number 1, is also being used in this regard. He is going to be operating as air, and I think it's largely just due to the fact that the way he gravitates towards knowledge and information, and he sucks it up just as easily as people try to breathe in air. That probably is the connection there. It's also revealed that Apocalypse will act as the element of water because of his malleable nature, his ability to change his self, his body, his atoms, as well as the atoms and matter in other things. It makes sense that he would be water. Now, where does Storm play in all this? Storm as a character has been through a lot as of late. We saw in the previous issue, she was tempted with the Uranos trigger trigger. The idea of being able to take the character Uranos, an Eternal capable of untold numbers of genocide, able to just unleash a wrath across the entirety of Arakko that would leave very few alive in its wake. Storm has decided to not bend to Uranos' whims and temptations. She even destroys the Uranos trigger in this issue, basically taking it off the table, making it pretty much a non-starter for her. She feels that if she is going to commit mass genocide, she's going to do it herself. She's going to bloody her own hands. And while she seems to be of the belief that she would be able to control herself, Apocalypse doesn't think that's going to be the case exactly. That it's just something she's telling herself that she wants to believe, but maybe she won't be able to accomplish. Now, we have seen Storm lose her shit in the past, and she is quite deadly when she does. But in this case, while some may think, oh, well, how is Storm not air in all of this? How is she not water in all of this? The reason why is because she is none of these elements. She is going to be the crux in which all these things meet in the middle. Because Storm, as Apocalypse says, and I have said quite often, Storm is magic. And what is so magic about Storm is that she has the ability to make you click that like button. We're already more than halfway through the video, so it's safe to say you've enjoyed the video at least a little bit, so go ahead. While we're here, go ahead and do it. And also, if you're enjoying this video and you want to see more like it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell, so that way you don't miss anything. But no, in all seriousness, Storm has a connection to magic. She has a magic lineage. One of her ancestors was a former Sorcerer Supreme, a character that we've gotten very little information about, but a character by the name of Aisha of the Balabedu. She was considered one of the earliest Sorcerer Supremes, just after Agamotto himself, and she reigned for quite some time and was considered incredibly powerful. Storm is descended from her, and we've seen throughout her publication history that she does have a deep connection to magic that she has never really leaned into very much. And if you want to know more about that, you can check out this video up here and I'll tell you everything you need to know about it. But that said, this is something that has been readdressed in recent issues of Steve Orlando's Scarlet Witch series, where Wanda seemingly implied she knew a great deal about her heritage in magic and was planning to tell her more about it. And we even see in that issue, in a backup story, Storm tapping in to those magic roots. Now, in this issue, we don't really get to see exactly what it is Storm is capable of, but we see Apocalypse unlock the power within her. And while we don't get to see the full brunt of what she can do, the first thing that we see her do is that she seems to be able to channel in some way the same forces of life and energy Genesis herself seems to have very intimate knowledge of. And we see that she has created her own version of Krakoa out of the Autumn continent on Arakko, creating something new that is not Krakoa, but Kalrak. Something that walks, talks, and moves just like Krakoa does, but is massive in its scope and is seemingly following all of Storm's wishes as Storm pulls up on Genesis, who right now has Omega level control over life and nature itself, as well as having possession of the White Sword's, White Sword, Purity, and also possessing the Staff of Annihilation. She has a great deal of power at her disposal, and even she is marveling, and I could even dare make a case for in fear of what Storm is able to accomplish, telling her to summon her Arakko. I'm very curious to see exactly how far they're gonna let Storm go with this. I really have wanted for a long time for Storm to finally lean into those magic roots, to actually take up her place in that pantheon of characters. And I think it's also why I think not just in comics, but even across other media, we have seen Storm in places where normally we wouldn't see her. Case in point, look no further than the recent video game Midnight Suns, where Storm featured as a DLC character, being in a place where honestly Storm didn't really belong. Not to say that she shouldn't have been there, but just the idea that they were dealing with magic stuff, they're dealing with the supernatural, dealing with characters like Lilith and Mephisto and so on and so forth, and it was one of those situations where it didn't really make much sense for her to be there. But the more you look at her heritage and where she comes from, it makes all the sense in the world. Now granted, one could also make the case, well, they had a bunch of other random characters that didn't belong there, like Iron Man and Captain America and Captain Marvel and various and sundry other Avengers and X-Men characters like Wolverine. Yeah, sure, none of them should have been there, but it made sense for Storm in a lot of ways, especially if you know her history, and to take it even further, as I mentioned earlier, seeing her pop up in Steve Orlando's Scarlet Witch series and various other comics that are hinting and teasing at her heritage, it just all makes sense. But it seems like this next issue, we're finally going to see the big dukaroo between Storm and Genesis. It's time to take off heels, it's time to pull earrings, it's time to pull wigs off, snatch, weave, whatever you want to call it. Hands are about to be thrown, and I can't wait to see it. Other than that, the only other thing that's of note here in this issue, we do get to spend some time with John Ironfire in this issue, who is up against his former beau in Boothang, the White Sword, and I think it's one of those situations too where it's easy to forget that this is not the same John Ironfire that we were introduced to in Sins of Sinister. He doesn't have the same reverence for Storm that was seen in that crossover event. You don't see that here in this, and that's because it hasn't happened yet. But I can't wait to see where that's going to go, where it's going to take him, because it seems like John Ironfire is very capable in and of himself. So I feel like, yeah, he's definitely going to be a force for all of this. I also appreciate the fact that we see Death, as we saw the previous issue, Death has decided to work alongside Storm, and even openly admits to Apocalypse that he has killed his sister Pestilence. And it's one of those situations where Apocalypse seems very proud of him in doing that. It doesn't have the reaction I think some people might have expected, that Apocalypse might be angry about this. And it's like, no, he's perfectly okay with this. He thinks Death is doing the right thing, which leads me to believe we're going to see a lot more of Death coming up in the future, and maybe even just, if everything goes the way it should, who knows? Maybe he has a future with Storm. Also, we get to learn a little bit more about Nova's fate after he was struck by Pestilence's arrow. We know that he's not dead, but he's not exactly alive either. I mean, he's holding on. The Nova Force is ultimately what's keeping him alive, but I think it's safe to say we don't have to worry about him dying anytime soon. I don't think that, that's going to be an issue. We've seen Nova, as I talked about in the issue that had happened, that we've seen Nova deal and dance with death before, so I'm not really worried about that. He's come back from worse fates, so I don't think we have anything to worry about there. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell so that way you don't miss any of my future videos breaking down X-Men Red as well as other comics from Marvel and DC. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and until next time, let me know what you thought about X-Men Red number 17. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.